Hey everyone, good evening. It is Traci coming to you live from the New Hampshire Dog Walking Club. And I am here tonight with Helen St. Pierre of No Monkey Business Dog Trading. How are you, Helen?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm very excited to talk with you tonight. As some people may know, November is Senior Pet Awareness Month. And you may or may not know that Helen actually runs a senior hospice and rescue and has for the past 10 years. And you may know her as a certified professional dog trainer, but you may not know about this side passion that she has. And that's why we are here tonight, because she has done a lot of amazing things for many, many dogs. So she is going to talk to us tonight about their stories and share the good, the bad, and the stinky. Is that right, Helen?
Very stinky. Very, very stinky.
Well, good. Well, I see we have quite a few people joining us tonight. So just a couple things to let people know. If you have questions tonight, please feel free to ask them. Helen and I do want your questions. And if you would like us to see your name, you need to go to facebook.com/StreamYard. I'll put this banner up after so that we can see your name. You actually have to give permission because we are broadcasting into private groups in Facebook. And also, if you are a member of the New Hampshire Dog Walking Club community and you ask a question tonight during the live broadcast, then you will actually get an entry into our giveaways for the month as well. But we want to hear your stories. We want your questions. Helen's going to be sharing a lot of great information, so we're going to jump into it here with you. And before Helen introduces herself, I just want to give you a sense of what we're talking about tonight. So we're going to be looking at how to work with and bond with a senior dog, fun tricks and games to do with your senior dog. Also going to be talking about how to know when to have the talk. That's going to be emotional, but needs to be discussed, as well as how to advocate senior dog rescue and adoption. So buckle in, guys. Lots of great information to be shared. But again, before we start, Helen, please tell us about all the great stuff that you do at No Monkey Business Dog Training.
Oh, well, yeah. So I've been professionally training for about 20 years. Actually, it'll be 21 in January, which is just awfully scary to say out loud. You know, I was writing my bio for somebody recently for another podcast, and I was writing this stuff and I was like, oh my God, this is a lot of stuff. But you do it so slowly, it catches up with you. But I started my initial dog training. I started working in shelters. So shelter dogs, rescue dogs have always been a huge piece of who I am as a trainer and what I do. And that's kind of where Old Dogs Go to Helen evolves from, was just my love of working with shelter dogs and then realizing the need for helping senior dogs. When I moved back out to the Northeast, I moved from Colorado to New Hampshire. I had prior to that been a behavior specialist at the Humane Society in Colorado. And when I moved out here, my first order of business was to go find what is now the Pope Memorial SPCA. Now, this was 11, 12 years ago when it was built out of a very small chicken coop.
I remember.
It was tiny. It was awful. And I went in there after coming from this huge shelter in Colorado. I was like, where's your shelter? They're like, well, this is the shelter. And I said, well, I'm happy to help. Anything you need, I'm more than happy to help. And I talked to Kathy, and literally from that day on, I think we're at 12 years now. I have been going to the shelter every single week for 12 years, and I do all the evaluations. I train volunteers and staff, and I take senior dogs home and other dogs too. But I've been a huge advocate for senior dogs as well.
Well, so you must have that first story that kind of started it off, because you told me you started this about 10 years ago.
Yes.
So what was that turning point that made you decide to start Old Dogs Go to Helen and bring home that first senior dog?
So it's kind of an evolving story. The way that it worked was, the first real taste of senior dog that I got was in shelters. We're working in Colorado. I would take home, especially for, a lot of us shelter workers, we take our work home with us. We take dogs home. We take kittens home that need bottle feeding and all of that. And I would take these older dogs home that maybe needed to be watched medically, things like that. And I loved it, but I was young at the time. And quite frankly, I didn't have enough experience in the veterinary profession. I wasn't yet teching or doing anything that I ended up doing to really know enough about what long-term care of a senior dog would look like. It was when my own personal dog, Merlin, started to become senile and sick that I was sort of introduced to what senior care of a dog looks like, and their not just physical decline, but their mental decline, and how that changes what you're able to do with them, how your relationship has to change with them. You no longer, with Merlin, I couldn't do half the tricks and the things that with him that we had done together as a team before. And then what happened was I was taking home senior dogs kind of on and off, and then Merlin passed. Basically my heart dog passed at a ripe old age of 14. And I realized very quickly that I missed so desperately the long-term presence of a senior dog in the home, not just the dogs that would come and go, but a long-term senior presence. And I was on the shelter chat, we're on this chat, and they posted this picture of this little hairless dog that looked absolutely terrible. And they said, look at what just came in today. And it was Elliot. And I said, I will bring him home. I knew he was older. And Elliot started it all. And when I tell you that he was the stinkiest, grossest little dog you've ever seen, I am not exaggerating. He was completely bald because he had been very neglected. He was skin and bones. He was flea ridden. His nails had grown into his pads. He had been fed leaves. They actually said, we've just been feeding him leaves mixed with a little bit of cat food. So he was absolutely in the worst shape. And through the process of a year and a half, we brought him back to life. And it was like, once I understood how senior care worked and hospice care worked, I was hooked. Now I can't not have an older dog in the home and help them through that phase of their life.
Oh my goodness. Well, we want to hear from you too. If you're watching us live or if you're watching on the replay, let us know. Are you loved by a senior dog? What is their name? What is their age? Let us know. I have a senior dog as well. Many of you have met her. Her name is Dakota. She is 13 years old. She is a Collie Brittany Spaniel mix, and she's not that stinky yet. I do anticipate that's coming, but she definitely has her own personality. But one of the things that I love about senior pets, I also have 2 senior cats, is when you look in their eyes, there's so much wisdom. Mm-hmm. There's so much knowledge. And I think it's not only there to teach younger dogs, but it's also to teach us humans. What you must have been touched. Well, I know you've been touched in many, many ways. You share your story on your website, but what have you learned from your experiences with these senior dogs?
My biggest thing with the senior dogs in bringing into my home is they are a very good constant reminder of me of where we're all headed with our dogs, where the journey is going. Okay, if we're lucky, if we're lucky and our dogs don't pass early or something terrible happens, all of our dogs will get to a senior point in their lives. And it's a really good reminder for me as a trainer. It's a really good reminder for, I think, everybody, all my clients and people that have dogs, that, when your dog is in the middle of shredding your sofa and you just want to, tie them to your mailbox and drive away. And I've had those days with my own young dogs. You've got your seniors that remind you of like, this is where it's going. And there are some of and I promised myself I wouldn't cry, but there are some of my senior dogs that I've lost that I would have given anything to have had them for an extra month or an extra 6 months, no matter how naughty they are. In fact, the naughtier they are, the happier I am. So it's a really good reminder for us as humans who tend to be very impatient and tend to be, we struggle sometimes with the inconvenience of adolescence and crazy puppy antics, to see seniors and to be reminded of this is where we're going. So we've got to appreciate every moment that we have with these amazing animals.
Well, and it must be very rewarding too, coming from your aspect of being a certified dog trainer, because you already have that advantage to knowing and understanding what they need versus, say, myself, who hasn't had that official training. And, it can be a little bit more difficult potentially to help them
Right.
with what they need. Do you really feel that's benefited you and them greatly?
It's every dog that comes into my home, whether they're a board and train, whether they're a senior or a hospice rescue, whether they're a new dog that I bring in for my own reasons, like Aslan or Joker, or any of my own personal dogs, teach me something. The biggest thing that they teach me is that every single dog is an individual. Every senior dog that I have brought in has had their own personality, their own needs, their own struggles, whether mostly physically, but a lot of them have had their own emotional, mental struggles. And that's always extremely beneficial to me as a trainer, just to keep me sharp. It keeps me watching. I can't get complacent. And I'm the kind of person, as I'm sure you can see, if I have 10 dogs in my house, that I love controlled chaos. I actually thrive off of it. I like to be around that type of atmosphere. And so it helps me a great deal to be around that kind of learning experience all the time.
Wow. Oh, amazing. Well, we've got some comments coming in. Let's just take a look here at what people are reporting. So let's see. We've got, I have Fenway. He's 14-year-old cockapoo, my very first dog, the sweetest boy and best snuggler. I know this is Michelle because we have met Fenway, and he is a lover. We love
So
Fenway.
cute.
Yes. Let's see. We've got Melinda. My senior dog, Lily, just passed away on September 3rd this year. Very sorry to hear that, Melinda.
I'm sorry,
Best
Melinda.
dog ever.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing that with us. Lisa, my best friend's dog, Bear, is a 13-year-old Shiba Inu Shepherd mix who has canine cognitive disorder and starting to slow down physically. Yeah, all of
that's
the
tough
ins and outs that come with our senior pets that we just need to be there to support them. Let's see. Our last two dogs before our recently adopted young dogs were senior adoptions. Elvis was 10 and Buddy was 13 when we brought them home. We lost both last year, Elvis at 13 and Buddy at 14. We will definitely adopt another senior once Rocky and Juniper are fully comfortable in our home. Oh, that must be Terry. Yeah, because I know she has Rocky and Juniper. That's wonderful. You guys offer a wonderful home and environment too for dogs. So that's great to hear, Terry. Let's see. We've got, I have an 11-year-old lab mix, her older brother, an 18-year-old dachshund. Wonderful. Not wonderful that he died, but wonderful that he lived 18 years.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, and he is so missed, I'm sure. Adding to the mix, we have a 1 and a 2-year-old dachshund.
Oh, that's awesome.
Well, when you have all that love in your heart,
I know, the little lowriders. I love the lowriders. They're so freaking cute.
And Amanda, every single day is a gift with our senior dog. Yep, our 12-year-old boy is amazing. Yes, their little Frenchie Ozo. He is a love.
Oh,
I have gotten to know him over the years. Very, very precious. And at what age is a dog considered senior? Oh, okay, so that's a great question.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, it very much depends on sometimes their size and their breed. So the old standard used to be that if once a dog was 7 or older, they were considered a senior. But now, that number, especially for small dogs, is up there at about 8 or 9 years old. But, when you talk about Great Danes, once a Great Dane hits around the 6 or the 7-year-old mark, those dogs are definitely considered seniors. So I think that's a great question. We all know those 10, 11-year-old dogs that act still like they're 2 or 3 years old. But that's usually the way that most vets now will look at it in terms of the breed and the size. These giant breeds that we know don't have as long of a lifespan, their senior age is usually 6, 7, sometimes even less. And smaller breeds that tend to have a longer lifespan, their senior age is a little bit higher.
And I think we're finding too that pets are living longer lives just due to changes in nutrition, understanding about sustainable pet care practices. So, maybe, I don't know if you would agree, maybe that's one of the reasons veterinarians raise the level from 7 to 9 years old as far as.
Yeah, I think what we're finding is that, just like you said, especially as medical care is advancing, that we're finding that, a small dog, they're not degenerating the same way an Irish wolfhound is, at 6 or 7 years of age. And that's where we start to look at, like, is that when we need to shift their diet? Do we need to start thinking about arthritis and that kind of thing? So changing the age means that we may hold off on changing certain things that we used to add, at 7 years old, when it was the standard across the board. Maybe you were adding in joint supplements to a dog that didn't necessarily need it yet. So I think that's helping too.
And if you're just joining us, we are talking with Helen St. Pierre of No Business Dog. Let me try that one again.
I keep it really long. I keep the name
dog training. Well, and I love the name of your company too. It is so cool. No monkey business dog training. And she is also the founder of Old Dogs Go to Heaven. And it is National Pet Awareness Month. And we are having a great conversation about senior pets and all of the love and issues and challenges that come with them. And we actually have a full month lined up of educational topics, resources, and tips for our community on senior dogs. So I hope you'll stick with us this month. So we have a few more comments. I want to get to a couple more questions and then maybe go into some stories on some of your rescues.
Sure.
Okay. Let's see here. Deborah is sharing that her dog, Ruger, I think is how you pronounce it, we adopted from you, and he has had 3 ear ablations and is still here with us. He is on Apoquel too for his anxiety, but we love him.
Oh, that's awesome, Deborah.
So she adopted this dog from you?
It must have been from the SPCA.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Through a posting on your website?
Maybe. Yeah, I am always sharing these dogs, but people at the SPCA, I'm kind of like a glorified staff member now. So every dog that's adopted through the SPCA that's over 6 months of age gets an automatic consultation with me free of charge.
Oh, nice.
I do all of their as much promo and BMOD stuff. So yes, probably through the SPCA. I don't personally do adoptions.
Well, and she said that his name was Oreo when we
Oreo. Oh, awesome.
Does that ring a bell?
Okay. It does ring a bell.
Oh, okay.
It does ring a bell. So that's awesome. Thank you, Deborah.
You seem like the kind of person to me, no matter how many dogs you meet, that you would remember every single one.
Every dog except for the people. Okay. So The worst part is I'm in the grocery store down the Oreo aisle putting Oreos in my car, and they're like, "Oh, hi, Helen." And I'm like, if you don't have your dog, I have no idea. But they'll show me a picture on their phone and I'm like, okay, now I know who you are. Yes.
Perfect. Yep. I hear you. Let's see. Ray says, my 9-year-old golden retriever Tucker is only senior at heart, and the whiteness of his face. Still crazy puppy energy every day. That's awesome. Cherish it while you can. Diane says, any tips on how to keep our heading toward seniors cognitively healthier? My Zoe is in a going on 11 yellow lab. My whole family loves Helen, and she has helped with every one of my family's dogs.
Oh, hi, Diane. The cognitively healthy is something that we're actually still finding out a lot about, how the brain ages. I mean, we're still figuring some of this stuff out with humans, let alone with dogs. So there are now a lot of actual diets and supplements that we found that you can add into your dog's routine. And a lot of vets are now very familiar with this, that help physically. And then mentally, I think that one of the most important things, and I know that we'll probably get into this a little bit sooner or later, Traci, is, working with my senior dogs. I think what happens is we spend a lot of time exercising and training our dogs in those first 3 to 4 years of age. And then once our dogs become sort of a part of the environment, we'll bring them out, we'll do our walks, but we won't spend as much time, at least a lot of us don't spend as much time working them. And I think that it's really important for our older dogs to still get some of that to help them stay cognitively healthy, so to speak. They don't have to be running agility courses, but even just working with them on some scent games and doing some basic training and, some find it work is really, really good for their brain.
Yeah, I think that is so important. I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because I think a lot of people take for granted the brain stimulation that dogs need. And sure, they need their balance of exercise, but there's so many fun things now that are happening in our area for dogs to get involved on a in a mental way. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Some of my wonderful clients with their, old blind basset hounds were taking their old dogs through nose work classes all the way up until the very end. And, It doesn't have to be physically taxing on the dog, and it doesn't have to be overly mentally taxing, but there are some really fun things that you can still do with your senior dog, Diane, to keep them sharp, let's say, just as sharp as you can. And then again, talking with your vet about some of the supplements and diets that they're now coming up with that really are helping physically as well stay healthy.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's see. We've got Heidi says, my dog Herschel is around 11 years old. He has lived with me as my only dog for 8 years. How can I know if he would enjoy having another dog in our house? Maybe he'd be happier as an only dog?
Oh, Heidi, that is such a great question. So I am a terrible person to ask because I'm like, get more dogs. If you can have more dogs, get more dogs. But it is really important if you have a dog that has lived as an only dog for 8 years to consider the reasonings behind, at this point, for an 11-year-old dog getting another dog. And also, again, this is why I'm a huge advocate for senior or older dog rescue. When you say another dog, it could absolutely, you may want to bring in an older dog, a company or a friend for your senior dog. And some dogs love that. Right now in my home, and I can talk about my current seniors, but I mean, I have Lucy. Lucy's almost 12. She came into the shelter as a multi-dog household, and her 2 housemates were adopted without her, and she fell apart. So I brought her to my house because I have plenty of friends for her to have. And she didn't really mesh onto anybody. But since bringing home my other 2 hospice seniors, Muffin and Scuffy, they are now like 3 peas in a pod. Now, if Lucy were in a home and I were to bring in a puppy to her, she would not care for that. So I think it's very dependent on your dog and the other type of dog. And also asking yourself, why do we want another dog? Is it for me? Because for me, when I bring another dog into the home, it's for me. It's for a purpose. I don't bring another dog in for my other dogs. Sometimes I'm tempted to, but I always think, if these dogs don't get along, am I going to be okay managing it and just individually giving these dogs what they need without them having each other? So if you would like another dog for you, I certainly understand that need and that want. But if they don't get along, be prepared for how you can make it and mitigate that so that both animals still live fully enriched, happy lives and aren't overstressed by each other's presence. And usually that's most people are very capable of doing that. It's just making the right decision. It's a great question.
Yeah. Thank you, Heidi. And great answer. Thanks for that. Good insight. Traci says, I have had 2 prior female standard poodles. They lived healthy and active lives till 12 and a half and 13 and a half. I now have a 3-year-old male standard poodle. Will there be any differences due to gender? I guess she's asking in regards to longevity.
Maybe, it really depends. Again, every dog is an individual. I certainly don't, when I'm taking on a rescue, I don't go, oh, it's a male. Thank God he might, have less XYZ, or female do XYZ, that kind of thing. Not usually differences due to gender. It's usually more just based on personality and just genetics, who that dog is, and how that dog is physically made up. Great question, though.
Yeah. Thanks, Traci. All right. So Heidi says, my dog Herschel is around. Oh, I think we
did that one. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. So maybe she asked it again because she wasn't sure if it got through. Monica says, maintain curiosity for life in regards to brain stimulation. Yes. Stimulation. Yeah, absolutely. It does. All right. So good that we've gotten through all the questions and comments. Thank you very much, everybody. That is fantastic. So do you want to share some stories from Old Dogs Go to Helen?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I can tell you how Old Dogs actually started. It wasn't, I wasn't accepting donations. I've been doing this for a long time without anybody really knowing about it. Okay. And one of the social media started to become a much bigger thing over the past 5 years. So, everybody kind of watched Elliot blossom from this tiny, bald, like feeble little creature to this amazing, fluffy little dude. And then Elliot passed. And I had a few hospice dogs that I take in. I think it's important to mention that not all the dogs I take in are seniors. Some of the dogs that I've taken in are hospice, dogs with brain tumors, dogs with significant cancer that are even younger that just need a soft place to land until their time is there. But I messaged the shelter because I said to my husband, Elliot's been gone. We've had a couple of seniors. I really want to take a dog in now. I'm ready for another senior. And I messaged the shelter and I said, who do we have in the back that is the oldest or the stinkiest dog? I know it's almost Thanksgiving. Who can they send me? And I will never forget Nikki at the shelter, who I now consider a very good friend, sent me this picture of what ended up being, we ended up calling her Prudence, but this bald pit bull with, she was so thin that you could see like the lines in her neck, and she was on this bed. And Nikki was like, all we've got is this dog, but she hates other dogs. And she's really miserable here. And all I wrote back was, I'll take her. And I drove there, and she was, I'm not joking. She was so stinky. She was crusty. She was bald. She was cranky with other dogs because she felt like poop. And she was intact. And Prudence was, everybody started to realize, like, wow, you can do that. You can go to a shelter and ask for the stinkiest, grossest dog they have. And there are some in there. They're in the back. They're not usually up front, or being publicized everywhere. And people loved Prudence's story. But the big one thing that changed to old dogs was Jupiter. Jupiter was a giant Mastiff mix that I brought home that had the highest, other than now, Scuffy and Loretta had some of the hardest medical issues of any dog that I'd taken on, in terms of his care was around $1,000 a month. He had severe heart issues. He had skin issues. He had allergies. He had digestive issues. He was blind. I mean, he was also intact. I mean, he was a whole nother ball of wax. And I took him on knowing all of this, but somebody emailed me and said, hey, can I help you with him financially? I can't take on a senior dog, but I would really love to just give you something for some of these meds. Or can I give you a dog bed for Jupiter? And I sat down with my accountant and I said, I'm not sure how to take this, or do I use it as income if I'm doing that? And she said, well, why don't you think about starting, a charitable foundation where people can actually make donations and you can put that towards this specifically for that. And I said, okay. And that's where it started, honestly. It does not, Old Dogs Go to Helen does not mean that I would not be doing the work that I'm doing. I would be taking these senior dogs in no matter what, because I'm crazy. But Old Dogs Go to Helen is kind of a way for a lot of people who can't necessarily do that to help and watch the stories and feel like they're contributing to that a little bit, changing one small dog's world. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Oh, wow. Oh, my goodness. Okay. I told people too that I was going to try to get through this conversation without crying. So we'll see who goes first here.
Yeah. And I mean, you can go to my website, but you can do that now, Traci, if you want to look down.
Yeah, because I'm seeing all the great pictures of these dogs I want to show people here. Let's see. Because this is Prudence at the top of
That's Prudy. Yeah, oh God. She was such a wonderful girl. And if you keep scrolling, I mean, we'll see all the kids. You'll see that's Elliot. That was when he started to get hair back, but you can still see he was pretty bald still, even in that picture. He had absolutely no hair, but it was really cool to see him thrive. And he actually ended up having an amazing photo shoot with Kimberly Sarah Photography. They brought him in, and I have that hanging of him in my office, little Elliot. Yeah, he was a really, really good kid. And if you keep scrolling, Traci, you'll see that was Sarge. Sarge was my amazing boy. I promised myself I wouldn't cry, but Sarge came after we lost Prudy, and I work sometimes quite closely with a Maine rescue, an old dog rescue called Old Dogs New Digs. And I had messaged Mandy after Prudence died, and I said, hey, you know, here's what I do. If you have any old dogs with serious health issues that you can't find a home for, send them my way. And that night she said, here's this dog. He's got Cushing's. His back end is failing. You know, he's got all these other issues. Do you want him? And I said, sure, I'll pick him up this weekend. And that was Sarge. And he was the sweetest, best boy. He would follow us around, and he had the biggest bark. If you did not let him in the yard, in from the yard, within the 10 seconds that he decided he wanted to come in, I mean, it was like the whole house shook when he barked. Such a good kid. Such a good kid.
And I love the big smile on his face, too.
I know. I know. He was so happy. Such a happy. That's Blackbird. Blackbird came to us again through the shelter. He was 13 when he came in, and his hind end was significantly failing. And I took him home hoping that if we got some weight off him and we gave him what he needed, he would bounce back. But it actually sometimes can be the opposite. Sometimes we bring them in and they finally feel like they can go. We got him a wheelchair, and we tried. But after a few weeks, he really, really was struggling to even move and use his hind end. The saddest thing about Blackbird is that he had lived outside for the majority of his life. And the first few days that he was with me, it was summer, he didn't know how to be inside. He was so panicked. So I ended up sleeping on the deck with him for the first few nights under the stars. And my husband has some great pictures of me huddled next to this giant black dog on the wooden deck. I didn't sleep, but he slept. And eventually we finally got him to sleep inside.
Oh, wow. Well, again, this one, he has a huge smile on his face.
Yes.
And I think that's a testament to the love and care that you gave him.
That's Honey. Honey is a senior husky that we got through Old Dogs, New Digs that actually my other head trainer and best friend Katie took. I already had Sarge, and I said, I can't take Honey, Katie, and Katie's been bitten by the senior dog too. But what was nice is Katie took her in, and I facilitated through Old Dogs the care that Honey needed. So she got a lot of what she needed too, which was awesome. Such a sweet girl. That's Rambler. Rambler had a brain tumor and stayed with me for only about a week. He was a young boy, pit bull, but he was severely neurologically challenged because of his, he either had a lesion on his brain or a brain tumor. But I was able to bring him in, get him some veterinary care, and actually decide what was going on. And he had a really good few days. He wasn't with us long, but a great example of giving a dog a great last few days in a home rather than him passing in a shelter, which was where he was when he came to me.
Yeah. Wow.
Oh, little Oliver. Oliver was a 16-year-old Pomeranian that was left at the shelter. And once again, the girls at the shelter know exactly what to do. They just sent me a picture of him and said, 16-year-old just left at the shelter. And I was like, I'm on my way. And I just went and picked him up. And he had a few really good days. He ended up having a really awful testicular cancer. So he was struggling to hold his urine, and he was really having a hard time. But we were able to give him some pain meds and give him a good few days while he was with us. Just again, a warm bed, cozy spot to be and feel safe is the most important thing for me.
Yep, exactly.
Oh, there's my Jupiter boy. Giant. I mean, that picture does not give you enough of a perspective of how big that giant dog was. And, it was funny because we had Sarge before Jupiter came home, and my husband said, the next senior that we get, and Sarge's back end and Blackbird's back end was so hard to lift, up the stairs and stuff. And so my husband said, honey, the next one could we get maybe if it's a smaller senior dog, because my back hurts. And I was like, sure. 2 days later, I'm like, here's this 105-pound Mastiff that can barely walk. And, and he's like, okay. And we actually ended up using a wheelchair for Jupiter as well. He got a good 6 months with us. He had a really, really good last run. We took him to the beach. He was awesome.
Oh, that's great.
He was awesome. Jackson's another example of a hospice case. Jackson came to me this thin. This is him on the couch. And he came into the shelter and was an example of, we knew we had to make a decision on him. And a lot of the times when that happens, the staff is all on board. We know what's coming. But what I like to do and what Jake and I like to do is bring the dogs and give them their best last days. You know, we want to do that as much as we can. And that's what we gave Jackson. I think he only had 48 hours with us after he came into the shelter. But again, he was on a sofa and he was loved.
Nice.
Little Pico. Pico broke my heart, if you want me to be honest. Pico was an old dog's new digs rescue that they contacted me about. Senior little Chihuahua with a severe heart murmur. And I've never had a Chihuahua. Chihuahuas weren't something that I don't actively, you know, and I actually don't work with a lot of them because not a lot of people with Chihuahuas that have problems probably just pick them up, you know, like, or you just put them away. Right. So I hadn't really worked with it or ever held a dog this big before. And I picked him up. We met halfway and I fell in love with this little guy on the way home, but his heart failure was so significant that he had no appetite. So I ended up trying to syringe feed him. We gave him an appetite stimulant and all of that. And he was one where he started to go into heart failure after 7 days with me. And I had to rush him in for an emergency euthanasia because he was failing so fast. And he broke my heart because a lot of the dogs that I take on, Traci, I know that they don't have a lot of time. But I thought for Pico, for some reason in my head, when I took him, that I had longer. So it was a shock after only a week. He really broke my heart quite a bit. So, and then, but after him, I think if you scroll down, I think we have Miss Loretta. Yeah, there's my girl. And then we had Loretta, and Loretta changed my life. Loretta was, I think she still is, because I still think she's here, probably one of the greatest dogs I've ever known. And nobody wanted her. She was through Old Dogs, New Digs. They contacted me. They said, we've got this dog with, again, same thing, all these medical issues. She's got Cushing. She's incontinent. She was covered in masses, little skin tags all over her. And nobody really was aesthetically drawn to her, you know, and they were really, and I just lost Pico and they felt so terrible that they had given me Pico and he'd only lasted a week. And they said, here's Loretta. She's actually okay. And I said, okay, sure. And I picked this dog up and I was still really broken from Pico, but I picked this dog up and Traci, I can tell you right now, this dog, one of my soulmate dogs, and just a phenomenal spirit and creature, and I miss her every single day. But I truly believe that she came to me for all the right reasons after that. Because after Pico, I was very ready to be like, I can't do this. This is too hard. I've been doing all these hospice and serious cases, and Loretta came and kind of reminded me why I do this the way I do it.
Dogs do that well.
Yes. Then there's little Clove. Katie had another little another small little dog, Clove. She was a Jack Russell mix. And oh my God, this tiny little 15-year-old dog had more sass than all of our dogs combined. She would run around the house and just bark at you. And she was a party police. You know, if the other dogs were playing, she would run around and bark. Wonderful little dog. God, they just go on and on. There's so many of them. You keep scrolling down. There's little Baxter. So talking about dachshunds, Baxter was given to me by actually a very wonderful family who was moving, and Baxter had severe car anxiety. And they were worried for the long car ride that he would not do well with cognitively with the change. So he was a great example of some people wanting what's best for their senior dogs. And Baxter did well with me for a few weeks, but then his cognitive decline came. But he was just the cutest little bagel. I used to call him my bagel because he would just curl up. And if you ever seen a dachshund curled up into, they look like these little bagels. I loved him. Little Lucky. Lucky was given to me at, I think he was either 16 or 17 years old. The family just couldn't care for him and didn't want him anymore. And they gave him to me, and he did not last long. I think he was, some dogs that come to me, although it's not easy to say out loud, they do die of a broken heart when they have been left. And Lucky, I think, was a great example of that. He had 4 days with me, but after the first 24 hours of going like, okay, this is cool, there's no new friends, he really took a very steep downhill decline and started having some very serious seizures, and I had to make a decision for him fairly quickly. But he really struggled. But it's so freaking cute. I mean,
yes, he
look
is
at his little
adorable.
face.
I know. Wow.
He's so cute. And then this is my most recent boy, Arrow, who we just lost. I had Arrow for 3 weeks. Another example of the shelter saying, "Hey, Helen, meet your new dog." And they sent me a picture of him in the shelter. He was surrendered to the SPCA, not through any fault of his own, 12 years old. And Arrow taught me a lot this recently just about I take dogs on that have significant physical decline. I'm used to that. I'm okay with watching back end. I'm not okay with it, but I'm used to, and I've habituated to watching back ends struggle, or heart failure, or hearing loss and eyesight loss. But Arrow cognitively declined in such a way of anxiety that was incredibly difficult for everyone to watch. And I, for 3 weeks, kept thinking, if I just give him time, like I had given all my other seniors time, that he would hopefully feel better. And in fact, he just got worse and worse. No matter what we did for him medically, no matter what we did for him mentally, his anxiety was just completely and totally out of control. And eventually the vet just said to me, like, this is not fair. He's not living a good life. And he was a great example of, bringing another dog into the home. He was the first senior that in 10 years of doing this, that truly affected my other dogs in a negative way. Because they were like, what do? We don't know how to help him. My other seniors that come in, they curl up and my dogs curl up next to them, and Arrow could not. He would pace all night and then he would pass out and then wake up and pace again. And all my dogs just were on edge. It was really an awful thing to watch. So, I've been struggling with him recently, quite frankly, because a great example of, what if I had done this? What if I had tried that? And no matter how many times your vet says to you, Helen, you've done everything, you can't keep doing this to yourself, you're still going to do it. And I guess that means that I'm just human still. So
that's right.
Yeah.
Well, and Helen, I know that, people in their lifetime may have to make the end of life decision for one or a few dogs. Right. You've had to make it for dozens of dogs. How can you talk to us about that process, and how do people know when it's time?
There's usually two ways that it will go with senior dogs. You will either have something significant will happen, which I talked, like Lucky started having major seizures that were back to back, or Baxter started also, a lot of the big things is they will lose feeling in their legs, or something dramatic will happen that will force you to make that decision, which in some ways, quite frankly, for me is a blessing, because it's like, I know that I'm doing this dog a service by removing that stress and that pressure, or that I'm giving them that relief. The harder ones for our senior dogs is as we watch a slow and steady decline. So it's a slow loss of limb function in the back end, or even in the front end. It's a slow loss of joy in little things. It's a slow loss of joy in eating and things like that. And that's where you get so used to, or it's so slow that you sometimes don't quite realize that you need to be really having that discussion. And you have to pull the emotional part of yourself out and talk to yourself rationally. And the hardest dog I've struggled with that was with Loretta, because Loretta had major arthritis. I had her x-rayed and her spine was completely fused. She was in agony. And I just kept thinking, well, if I try some more pain meds, or if we add this, or if we add that. And then, it hit me when I went to reach for my car keys, and she didn't get up. She was like, and which was always Loretta's thing, the car. And she was like, not today. No. And I was like, all right. And you have to have those kinds of, I had to say, all right, Helen, you need to have a real discussion with yourself. And my big thing with senior dogs and making that decision is knowing that I want them to go on the best day, the best last day. I want the dog to be aware. I want the dog to not be in so much pain that I am having to rush them in. I want the dog to know that I'm there with them and for it to be peaceful. I want the dog to have a good last meal or enjoy, like, I want to be able to do those things, not wait until it's an emergency at 2 a.m. and I can't be right. That's kind of where I coach people a lot in making those decisions is, is this not going to get better? And if it's not going to get better, this issue that you're seeing in your dog, where do we draw the line? Is it when your dog is no longer looking out for things that we know bring them joy, or is it just when we can't let go? Right. So, it's a huge gray area and every single dog and person is different. But for me, I want my dog to go on a good day. I don't want their last day to be the worst day.
I love that advice. I think people just really need to know how to tune into what their dog is telling them, because the pet knows. They'll tell you when they're ready, but you need to be open to listening. And a lot of people aren't.
And eating and walking are not quality of life. And that's something that, I have discussions with people is, yeah, your senior dog may be eating, but just because I ate today, does that mean that I had a good day? Just because I was able to walk today. I mean, to me, those are just baseline quality of life. If I'm eating and I'm walking or, and I'm not in any, the major distress, that to me is just a day. But if that's all your dog is doing, if he's just existing, that to me doesn't solidify that dog is is okay, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So listen, we have a few more comments and questions.
Yes.
Do you still have time to hang out with us for a bit?
Of course.
Okay.
Sure.
All right, good. I wanted to make sure. So let's see here. We've got Michelle just wanted to mention that Sarge had a very sweet face.
My salt and pepper boy.
She also said, "You are amazing, Helen. Thank you for doing what you do." Absolutely. I echo that as well. It is amazing what you do for these pups. Agreed. Christine said, "I tuned in a little late. You are a very special angel for these seniors, Helen. Thank you for your selfless love and support of these dogs." Yes, absolutely. Are most of these dogs dropped off because the owner doesn't want to deal with the end of life? Heartbreaking stories. Yeah, I agree. What do you know any of the backstories?
Oh yeah. And I try very hard not to be judgmental. I try to say, it doesn't matter how the dog got here. What matters is that the dog is here now and that I can take over and help. But a lot of dogs are dropped off because they don't want to care for the dog anymore. That was Sarge, quite frankly. The woman was like, he's old. I don't want to care for him anymore. And she just left him at a shelter right before Thanksgiving. And I try very hard not to pass judgment, but that is usually the majority of how senior dogs come in. Now, if you look at Scuffy and Muffin, my two little ones that I have right now, or even Lucy too, they came in because there was a death in the family. The people who loved them passed, but the family no longer wanted to care for them. So they came in. So, there are sometimes it's a secondary not wanting to care for the dog. But yes, a lot of it is that exact reason.
All right. Melinda says, "Such beautiful fur babies. I am moderator of Who's a Good Boy and Girl Facebook page, so I spend time sharing fur babies for adoption." Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you.
That's awesome, Melinda.
We need all the help we can get in this industry, creating, advocating for these wonderful pets. Thank you so much for your end of life advice. Those are exactly the points we've made decisions on as well, and it feels so good to have that validated. You are a real hero. Yeah. It's nice to hear from somebody who's been in the industry as long as you have, Helen, to just kind of give people peace of mind when it comes to making that decision, because it's extremely difficult. You rely on the advice and the feedback of your veterinarian and potentially family members, but there's not a lot of people, I think, that we know, at least in this area, that have been through this so many times with you. And you probably are an expert at the end of life process with dogs. And you're just such a great support and help for people.
I will tell you this. I had a really awful moment with Arrow after Arrow passed, where I was sitting on the sofa with my husband and I said, I've done this so many times with all these dogs all the time. Like, is there something wrong with me? Why do I now, take on these older dogs and I'm okay with watching them pass? Like, I go with them. Is there something wrong with me? And I was really struggling with it just personally. Like, why? And my husband and I talked about it, Jake, who is very much a huge part of, I could not do what I do without my husband, Jake. In fact, before I came down to talk to you, he was upstairs cooking chicken nuggets for Muffin, who's in renal failure. We're just trying to get her to eat something. And I'm like, are you making food for the baby? He's like, no, it's for Muffin. I'm like, okay. So we had this discussion and he said to me, because he used to be a police officer, he said, Helen, there are some people that can deal with medical issues in terms of like surgeons, they can open up somebody and they could do that. I could never do that. I'm too squeamish. There are some people that have incredible bravery to go for fires or to answer, 911 calls. And they have that, I'm okay with, which sounds in the best way, with being there through a dog's passing. I'm okay with being there. Like it's not easy. It's something that I take on, but it's something that I can do that I know that a lot of people can struggle with. And it doesn't mean that it gets easier to say goodbye to each one individually, but I have become very okay with the process of it. Which I guess that's a strength that some people have and some people don't. And it doesn't mean that it's a good thing or a bad thing, but that's kind of like how I validated it. It's like, okay, this is just something that I am okay with doing.
Wow. Well, I want everybody to know, if they want to learn more about what Helen does at olddogsgotohelen.com, please visit her website. And if you are able to, visit the donate page and give kindly, because Helen does a lot of work with these dogs to rescue them, to save them, to give them the best end of life possible, to advocate for them. And unless, Helen, you've won megabucks.
No, not yet.
Then you need our help to support these beautiful creatures and the work that you're doing. So please, guys, head on over to this website. Any amount of money that you can give to help Helen at her foundation is just so appreciated.
But you don't have, like, I tell people, I will do this no matter what. I just say, like, it always helps. Little Scuffy's going to have a huge tumor removed off his face next week, and I cannot wait for him to feel better. But I tell people, like, you don't have to. The biggest thing that I wish more people would do is just advocate for adopting senior dogs.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you offer any resources or anything like that on your website for people to better understand how to advocate for senior dogs?
No, I usually just, honestly, the Old Dogs Go to Helen Facebook page, a lot of people share it when I write posts about what the benefits of senior dogs and what it looks like and how amazing it is. I really have to, and I have it in the works. I have a book on my senior dog adventures and stories. And I'm hoping that might maybe, but I kind of suck at that. I have a little bit of an imposter syndrome where I feel like nobody wants to hear me talk about that kind of stuff. Like I'm just doing it, so to speak. So I have to get my head out of my cave and actually go and do that more.
Well, I'll tell you what, if people can't donate, then please go on Facebook to Old Dogs Go to Helen and share her stories, like her page, help get awareness for these dogs and help get them adopted. I mean, that is a very simple thing that you can be doing to share with your network. It can be very simple to create awareness and advocate for these dogs. So now, obviously, Helen does have a job that pays for these bills, and we want to advocate for that company as well. Very well known. She's been around for decades doing training. Have you been in Concord all this time, or have you?
No, I started, well, yes, I've been in Concord for 13 years now, but okay. Prior to that, I was in Colorado. Yes.
And you have a beautiful facility, and now you have a new beautiful facility. Do you want to tell us what's going on there? Not that you don't have enough going on already.
No, we just opened the second facility back where I was prior under Sandy's, where we're doing our day training program. And now we're moving to a larger spot in the same area that I'm in. It's 6,000 square feet. And what's really nice about it is I'm not going to be offering anything different. It's going to be a lot more streamlined. The nice thing about this is the main classes area will have its own enter and exit area, and the private consultations will have its own enter and exit area, which means that I'll be able to serve more people effectively and faster. So yeah, I'm in the process of doing that right now. If anybody feels like painting.
Just donate. You get out of painting.
rollers, lots of rollers.
And guys, if you love these kind of stories and these kind of talks and the type of education and awareness that we're trying to spread, join our community. Check us out at nhdogwalkingclub.com. Learn all about us and how you can support our partners like Helen and other wonderful organizations that are working very hard to give back to our communities. And we've got a few more comments here before we head out. So Christine says, great advice for the end of life process. I'm going through this with my 17-and-a-half-year-old cat. He's been failing for a while, but still purrs and cuddles. I will share with my family that it's a good idea to let him go on a good day. It's not going to be easy.
Yeah, Christina, that's such a great, observation. Let him have a good day. Let him know who he's with. Let him have a great, that's how I would want it. I always ask myself, I would want that. I would want to know who's holding my hand. I wouldn't want to be in so much distress that I wasn't able to be present.
Right. Yep. Good point. Jamie says, thank you for what you do. When the time comes, do you bring them into the vet or have the vet come to your house? That's a great question.
Great question, Jamie. And it depends on the dog. A lot of the times I will bring them in. At this point, the vets just know me like on a first name, and it's like, hey, here I come. But for some of them, like Sarge, Loretta, even Jupiter, we were able to do them outside on a blanket. I've had sometimes the vet has come to the house. It very much depends on the dog, and I want to make sure that they aren't overly stressed. So as long as the dog isn't going to be overly stressed on their last day going somewhere and laying on the grass on a blanket. It's very rare, though, that I do it inside the actual veterinarian office. I work with the vet based on the client and the dog, I should say.
Ray says, I struggled with knowing when was the right time to let go of my senior cat a few years back. It's so tough to make that decision for a pet when they don't always tell you when they're
Yes. Ray, that is such a great point. And that is something that I'm going to struggle with significantly with my current senior boy, Paddington, who's going to turn 9. He has lupus. He has significant arthritis, but Paddington will never, ever want to leave. I know that for a fact. He's never going to look at me and go, okay, I'm ready to leave you, Mom. Whew, I'm ready to leave you. So I am going to have to advocate for him, not him tell me. And I think that is something that we constantly are waiting for. Oh, he'll tell me. Sometimes they won't. Sometimes you have to tell them, it's okay. I've got this. We'll meet again at some point. So that's a great point.
Yeah, I'm glad you make that point as well. Melinda, thank you, Helen. You are very special. By the way, I'm a retired law enforcement officer. May God bless you.
Thanks, Melinda.
We all want to hear you talk about it.
Yes. I think they're talking about me advocating for seniors.
Yes.
I mean, the big thing that I tell people is I love puppies. Don't get me wrong. Puppies pay my bills. I love them more than anything. But senior dogs are really awesome first-time dogs and really awesome multi-dog households. Like, you will not have them shredding your couch. You will not have them, they are really awesome animals to bring in and give a great life to. They, however long it is, you just kind of have to sacrifice that part of it.
Right. And Diane says, you will learn a ton just turning into her page. Yeah, I agree, Diane. She shares a lot of insight and stories. You really pour your heart out into everything you do. And I think that's why it's so easy to learn from you and to just respect all of the amazing things that you've done and accomplished. So thank you for everything you do. And I'm going to try not to cry.
Of course. Well, thank you.
You are truly amazing. I am so grateful for you taking time out of your busy schedule to spend with us this evening to talk about these beautiful creatures. Thank you, everybody, for your wonderful questions and your stories. Please go help advocate for these pets, create awareness, not only during the month of November, but every single day of the year. We really appreciate everything that you do. So thanks everybody for joining us. Have a great day. Have a great evening.
Yes,
And,
thanks, guys.
We'll come to you live more in the future with Helen. I'm sure she'll have more great stories to share.
Give me a month. I'll probably have a giraffe. Okay. I mean, I'll probably have a senior giraffe in my backyard, Tracy. We could do it.
Too funny. So I'm just going to throw up your website here one more time as we head out. Any parting words of advice, Helen, before we leave?
Just love your dogs. They're awesome. They're the best things, honestly, since sliced bread, probably before sliced bread, but just love them, even when they're awful and they're driving you crazy. The one day they won't be there and you will miss it.
And if we see you and you stink, but you tell us you've adopted a senior pet, we will respect that stink right out of you.
I smell like yeast so bad because I took Stuffy to the vet today and he is covered in yeast and he has the worst skin infection. And of course it rained. So I'm wearing the clothes and I got out of and that's why I had to shower. I was like, I can't sit down there and smell myself. And I just smelled so bad. And I really need people to know that I do have good personal hygiene. I just rescue senior dogs. I'm sorry.
We're going to get you the t-shirt. All right. Thanks again, Helen. And thanks everybody. Have a great evening.